Hi everybody! We're going to be talking about one of my favorite cells today, which are, of course, neurons. These amazing cells send electrical signals, which get converted into chemical signals, which get converted back into electrical signals, to carry information very rapidly over long distances in our body, coordinating many of the amazing functions that are necessary to keep us alive. We'll start with the divisions of the nervous system. The nervous system can be divided into the central nervous system, which includes our brain and our spinal cord. This is the main information processing system of our bodies, really, but certainly of the nervous system. Then we have our peripheral nervous system. These are the neurons that are located outside of the spinal cord. They include not just the neurons that are in our legs and arms and digestive tract and so forth, but also include the cranial nerves that you studied in anatomy. Last, we have our enteric nervous system, which I'm going to put in a different color. We talked about this in the digestive system. This is the nervous system that is important for the intrinsic regulation of digestion. It contains the submucosal plexus and the mesenteric plexus, which are this self-contained gut brain, and while they work autonomously, they do receive input from the peripheral nervous system. They do communicate to the central nervous system. There is some information exchange despite its autonomous nature, I guess. Maybe that's the right word. Anyway, despite the fact that it has autonomous control over the digestive system. We can take these divisions of the nervous system and divide them even further. So if we look at this, we have the, let me highlight this word for you because this is actually an important word. You're going to want to know this word and be comfortable with it so that you can speak the language of neuroscience. The afferent, and I like to think of A as being arriving. I think about a train arriving at the station. The afferent division of the nervous system is the sensory nervous system, and this is the information that is being carried into the central nervous system to be processed. Sensory receptors are specialized neurons, specialized receptor cells that contain specialized protein receptors on the surface of their skin, on the surface of their plasma membrane, and they are responsible for detecting stimuli such as touch and pressure, pain, temperature, even our position. And then we also have our specialized sensory organs, which you would have been exposed to in anatomy. And these would include things like your olfactory bulb for smell, and your tongue for taste, your eyes for sight, your semicircular canal for balance, your ears, of course, for hearing. And so these would contain specialized structures for sensory information. The efferent pathway, and again, this is a word that you should know well, is efferent. And speaking of trains, I think of the efferent train as exiting the station. And so the efferent division carries motor commands away from the central nervous system to the periphery. And it's called motor primarily because it controls both skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, and smooth muscle. It also is going to control glands and other tissues such as adipose tissue. It can be divided into two main divisions, the somatic nervous system, also sometimes referred to as somatic motor nervous system, and that controls the voluntary action. So primarily the skeletal muscles. Okay, these are consciously controlled. We are aware of, or we choose to cause these movements. On the other hand, the autonomic nervous system is responsible for involuntary function. And it's going to control the smooth muscles, it'll control cardiac muscles, glands, and adipose tissues. This autonomic nervous system can be further divided into the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, or divisions, which we'll discuss in detail. And roughly speaking, the sympathetic nervous system is our fight, flight, or freeze response, whereas our parasympathetic division, again, roughly speaking, is our rest and digest, or sometimes we can say feed and breed, because it does have a role in reproduction. This handy little flowchart shows you all of the divisions in one large picture. It comes from a review that was published in the Nature, which is a very prominent journal. And we can look at this and we can see direction of communication, and we can see how these are grouped together. And so looking at just the central nervous system, brain and spinal cord, as I mentioned, peripheral nervous system has our sensory neurons, and that's going to be your afferent pathway. And those sensory neurons include neurons that travel into the dorsal root ganglia of the spinal cord. We'll discuss that in more detail when we do talk about the sensory nervous system. Or the cranial nerves. These would be the optic nerve, the olfactory nerve, all of the different cranial nerves that you studied when you were taking anatomy. You can look here, and here's our autonomic nervous system, both our sympathetic nervous system, shown here, and our parasympathetic nervous system shown here. Now this particular diagram has this enteric nervous system. Let me choose a different color. We'll pick pink. This enteric nervous system right here. And this arrow here indicates that this enteric nervous system is autonomous and works within the digestive system. The enteric nervous system has sensory neurons. They're not necessarily part of the sensory nervous system per se. They are found in the submucosal or mesenteric plexa, and they communicate with other neurons in the submucosa or mesenteric plexus. And so they're self-contained, and they are, remember, back to our digestive system, this is what we call the gut brain, and that it's this network of nervous neurons that are autonomous. But even though they are autonomous and they are capable of regulating motility and secretion in the digestive system, independent of any other part of the nervous system, the simple reality is there is some communication back and forth. That sensory information that we retain when the digestive system, we get maybe distension of the stomach, for example. That stretch or the distension of the stomach tells our mesenteric plexus to start causing contraction of the circular and longitudinal muscles, and in the stomach the oblique muscles, and all that churning is going to take place. But meanwhile, we do in fact send a signal through the sensory nervous system, this is our dotted line right here, that essentially is going to eventually make it to our central nervous system to give us those signals that says, hey, I'm full. Okay, and so there's communication, there's talk. We talked about the parasympathetic nervous system when we discussed digestive system, and so just as a reminder, this is going to stimulate digestive function. And then we discussed the sympathetic nervous system, and again, just as a reminder of the things that we already discussed, this is going to inhibit, for the most part, digestive function. And we'll discuss those functions in more detail when we talk about the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system.